All right. Well, Samuel, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and have a conversation with me. And I have to say, this has been one of the really cool things for me is as this community has continued to grow and as I've gotten to know more people like yourself, and spending time with these storytellers that are so amazing outside of the context of like, you know, either story slams or our events or whatever, just being able to sit down and like this morning go to Petite Choux and have breakfast in Cabbagetown and just hear about your life and your kids and what's going on. That's just been for me just a joy and a treat. So thank you for not only sitting down to do this interview, but just being a friend and hanging out. So I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine, and I didn't want it to just be coming and sitting and talking and doing an interview.
Yeah.
But to sit and have some time to chat and to connect over that.
Well, I love it. It was great, and breakfast was amazing. I love thank you for
Cabbagetown has some great places.
Yeah, and thank you for having me into your home. So this is a real treat. So thank you.
Yeah,
Well, as we kick this off, what I like to start our conversation with, like I've done with all the other storytellers, is just to hear a little bit about your story and how you were drawn into storytelling, because we all have our own stories, and so I love to hear what it was that started your journey, how you got involved in storytelling. So,
yeah, I mean, I think even at a really young age, hearing stories. You know, I grew up in a very religious environment, so I grew up with stories about Abraham and Noah, less so than Humpty Dumpty and Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah.
And even when I was young, I remember just feeling that I was listening to and hearing the same story that was told to my parents and grandparents and great grandparents, and I felt such a connection with thousands of years of history by sharing the same story. And then later in life, learning about Humpty Dumpty and Little Red Riding Hood, I felt the same connection, but kind of more horizontally, right? That I was learning the same story as the people next door to me and the people in the next town and the next city. And I felt that having stories was such a connection to me, both going backwards and across people, and I just remember that always being the case, and being able to then have family stories, right, where my kids are sick of hearing the stories that I've had, and my parents and my grandparents, and just having these family stories just make such a strong connection. And so I think stories has always had that impact on me. And then finding out that there's a storytelling community.
Yeah.
And I learned about it from Faye, who you know.
Yes.
And she mentioned to me that she's telling a story at this thing called The Moth. And I went and I listened, and I said, "Wow, this is great. This is really just people drop their walls and just talk, and it was great." Yeah,
I love that. So I have to ask, because most of us have that person in our family, whether it was a grandparent or an uncle or like someone that you just have fond memories of, that you can think back on hearing them tell stories when you were younger. Do you have a person like that comes to mind when you think of, man, that person was just an incredible storyteller, whether it was sharing, stories of, religious stories or just about the family that were just captivating?
yeah. Two people come to mind, both of my mother's parents. My mother's father, who we called Zadie, which is the Yiddish word for grandfather. Zadie, I used to sit on his lap, and he used to tell us stories and read books, and again, I didn't really understand all the stories. I didn't really understand everything he was saying, and but just that act of sitting on his lap and hearing him tell a story, it just makes such a bond. And and we have this family this family joke that one of the stories that he used to tell us, he was from Germany, so it was a German children's book. called Max and Morris. And it was a children's book for children that tells the story of these two troublemaking children and how they went through with their family and in their town and made trouble and mischief. And then a brutal ending comes to these children. And it's a story that my grandfather used to read to me and to my siblings and to my cousins. And again, I'm not sure how much I processed at the time exactly what happened to these children, but it was a children's book. But again, we now, in my generation, we look back at that so fondly that my grandfather used to tell us the story, and you can look it up if you want. What happens in Max and Morris to these kids, but it's not pretty, and we wouldn't read that book to our kids today. So that's just from that connection perspective. And then my mother's mother, who we call Bubby, which is Yiddish for grandmother, we used to sit at the Friday night meal and just stay up till all evenings, and she would just talk about her life and about her experience in Europe and her experience in the concentration camps and the effect on her family and effect on her life, and how she went through her life. And again, I was young, and a lifetime of impact those stories had on me, and my relationship with my Bubby, just from those late evenings, going till 1 o'clock in the morning, just sitting and talking together.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's the thing that I've found so interesting about this storytelling community is, obviously all of us who are involved in the storytelling community are around people that are very talented and gifted at telling stories, and we hear all these fascinating stories. But even before I was involved, if I would have just taken the time to think back on my experience, even though I wasn't formally involved in a storytelling group, like my dad and I have several relatives, grandparents, and I can remember fondly of times as a kid when listening to them talk about their childhood or tell stories about funny things that happened to them in school. It's like, story really is just, it's the way we connect. It's the way we share with other humans and shared experiences. And that's why I love it so much to hear and be intentional about hearing people's stories, because like you said, when you get that opportunity to hear from someone's past, like you get to see a whole nother dimension, another side of people, which is, I think, just amazing. So
and that connection is what it's about, right? And it's not about transmitting information. Right? When our kids sat on our laps and we read stories to them when they don't even understand what we're saying, right? And it's not about transmitting the story of what happened to Humpty Dumpty, right? It's about that connection that you don't get from other experiences.
Absolutely. So, well, so thinking about just growing up and your own experience of stories, is there a particular memory that comes to mind for you about the first time that you remember, whether it was in front of your family or in school or standing in front of a group of people, whether large or small, and actually telling one of your own stories? I mean, do you remember that time? What was that like?
Yeah, and I think I've always told stories, right? And that's kind of, I think, what attracted me to, when Faye invited me to go see the Moth, was always telling stories. And again, my kids make fun of hearing the same story over and over again. But sitting around the table with friends and with family and having people invested and engaged in the story that I'm sharing, right? And then having people laugh, right? Having people cry, right? It's a drug, right? And it makes me feel really, really good. But it also is just as good hearing stories, right? And being at the edge of my seat and crying and laughing, and so I think I've always been at the table, always sharing stories about things that have happened, and professionally, I speak, at professional conferences, but it's always been very technical, and
Yeah.
until more recently, when I've kind of been weaving storytelling into my professional world. Now that I've been learning more about it.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and I can say, I mean, obviously I've heard you tell multiple stories now up to this point, but I've always just really enjoyed your stories. And I remember the first time I ever heard you, Hannah and I were at a story slam, and you stood up, and it was the first time I'd ever seen you there. But your story it was so moving, but it made us laugh, and it made us cry, and just your perspective on that particular event, and then hearing just kind of how it shaped you and changed you, but you being willing and to be vulnerable like that. Again, I don't know about for you, but I've only told a handful of stories, but it's very cathartic. Like you said, it is a drug, because you feel that connection, and it's like this experience where you're in the moment, and you feel it, and you feel the connection with people listening, but then also being able to vocalize and share, whether it was a challenging time in your life, or an exciting experience that you had, whatever it is. Like, it's just been really neat for me to see kind of how that pulls people in.
Absolutely.
But then how it's also therapeutic. I mean, to hear each other again, it's a very human connection that's needed
and easy to do, easy to attain, right? Like, we just need to make sure that we have that connection. And I remember that you came over to me afterwards, and you shared with me what that was, and I've learned how important it is to do that. Right? Is how valuable that feedback is at the Moth, or wherever I tell a story. When people come over afterwards and tell me that it had an impact, or that I made them laugh, right? Or how it connected to something in their life, it is so valuable.
Yeah.
And it feels great, and validates, and it's taught me to be more intentional about doing that.
Yeah.
When storytellers get up, and I try to go over to them afterwards and to tell them what an impact it has had. And some stories have really had life impacts on me.
Yeah.
I was telling you earlier about a story that Al told.
Yeah.
That really had an impact on how relate to family and to life. And so I think it's really important, and I try to be really intentional about giving that feedback to the storytellers.
That's really good.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, my daughter and I were talking about this recently, about how when you really think about it, the world, especially the world we live in today, and even exponentially more if you're talking about social media and just the algorithm, so much is written into the algorithm and kind of what we hear that creates a division more than a connection. And yet when you listen to someone's story, you realize all of us are way more similar and alike than we are different, because again, we grew up very different, but yet I hear your stories, and I hear you talk about your family and all these experiences you've had, and though they're not 100% the same, there's aspects of all of them that I can relate to, because we're human and because emotions are similar. And so it's just been really cool for me to hear all these different people share all these vastly different experiences from me, but yet every story I hear, there's something in it that I'm like, yes, I connect. I get that, because
they're telling a story.
Yeah.
You don't know who they voted for.
Yep.
You don't know what their family situation is, and you're just sharing this information. And it's not about just hearing the details of the story.
Yeah.
Right. It is you're making that connection with them.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. That's just been such a gift for me, and a joy to hear again, like, from all these different amazing people. But that kind of leads into the next part, which is just thinking about this community. And again, every time I sit down to do these interviews, I'm just like, why did I wait so long? This has been just such a joy. So I'd love to hear from you what your experience has been like being a part of the Atlanta storytelling community, because I know now you're you've done a bunch of different events. I know you've gone to Carapace at least probably multiple times, the Moth Story Slams. You know, you've been involved with our event at Eddie's. I know there are other things I'm probably not even mentioning. So what's that been like for you, and as far as the people you've gotten to know and just the community itself?
It's surreal somewhat, and I appreciate the fact that it's surreal and that I don't really feel I don't know if it's imposter syndrome or I'm not a professional storyteller, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not polished and and I'm not perfect with the arc and the heroes and the lesson that's learned, and I'm not perfect about that, right?
Yeah.
But yet here I am sitting at the table with people who are, right?
Yeah.
And everybody in between, right? So there isn't this gate kept community for people who are these professionals, and it's just a community of people who are interested in sharing these connections.
Yeah.
So it's and that's how it feels. It just feels very, very comfortable. And similar to what I was saying about fairy tales as a child, I feel like this horizontal connection, right? And knowing little bits of pieces about people's lives that, you know, my neighbors in the community or friends from other areas, I don't know these bits of pieces, right? But our walls have dropped, and so we can connect over these things, and it doesn't really matter the other walls that have been set up. So I'm grateful to the storytelling community for having me be a part of it, and I hope I contribute to it, right?
Yeah.
And am able in my own way, not in this polished way, but in my amateur way of contributing to it.
Yeah. And again, that's what's beautiful about it. It's just the diversity. I mean, I think about, you know, from our events to the Moth to just everything I've been at so far, just looking around the room and seeing, you know, you've got people who are in their 20s who are like, you know, fresh out of college. You've got people who are well on into their, you know, 80s and who are still doing this. And you fill this room up with people who are all ages, all different backgrounds, all different religions and races. And they all have this bond and this love for each other, which is, again, just to me, just such a beautiful thing. So I have appreciated that just so much. And I don't know who it was I was talking to recently, but someone, we were having a conversation about the current world that we live in, and just thinking about even just, it was actually my wife. We were talking the other night about this, and I talked to someone else too, but just thinking about growing up in the 80s and 90s and how different that time was for our childhood than our kids' childhood. But then go back even a generation further, 50s and 60s, and then you go back even further, and just thinking we live in a world that is digitally more connected than ever. Like, we in an instant know what's happening on the other side of the world, this constant barrage of news and opinions, and yet in a lot of ways the world is more disconnected than it's ever been. And so for me, it's been beautiful this storytelling community has provided a connection that just is so much more real than, you know, online or whatever. And to me, that's just such a gift.
Yeah, and I talked to one of my sons about that, about, you know, when the world seems crazy, right? And the world seems overwhelming, right? And we talk about that, and what we say to each other is zoom in. Right? And zoom in to what we can connect with, what we can affect, and what's important, right? Like what happens in, you know, in some faraway country is important, and right? But the energy that we're using to get, you know, stressed or angry about that is wasted stress, right? And if we zoom into our family and our neighbors and our community, right? then we're able to really enjoy those connections. So that's what we keep repeating is zoom in.
That's beautiful. I love that. I'm gonna have to use that because I love that. And I have a good friend of mine who often talks about this idea of our spheres of influence and how each of us really only has a few like spheres of influence that we can really ultimately have a deep impact in. And so that reminded me when you said that zoom in, it made me think like there's a lot we could worry about, but then there's really only a few things that we can really connect with and make an impact. So to zoom in that's great advice. Well, as we kind of wrap up here, one of the things we were talking about over breakfast, which I think is just is really neat, is obviously we all have a lot of things we could share, and then there are things that whether it's just time or where we are in our current story, we just haven't had opportunities, to kind of dive into. But that's a question I often think about is, okay, so what are some of the ideas or stories or thoughts that you've had that you just haven't been able to share yet or just aren't quite there? I'd love to just kind of hear what you think about that.
So you want me to tell you the things I'm not comfortable telling?
Yes, don't tell me the story, but tell me the things that you've wrestled with, like, should I tell this or shouldn't? Yeah. That's funny.
So, I actually feel very comfortable at the Moth and storytelling events, and people say, oh, thank you for your vulnerability, and I actually feel very, very comfortable being, telling stories about my personal life. I think that, people compare storytelling to therapy, right? And being able to get things out and talk them through and get feedback on, right? And so I think that sometimes the line might get a little blurry, right? And I think that there's some things, like, around my marriage, my divorce, things that I would love to process through storytelling and share these parts of my life that that have been very difficult and some fundamental parts of my life. But I don't think that's fair to my ex. I don't think it's fair to my kids, and I think that I think that's probably an area where it's bursting a little bit. But I think I'll save it for therapy, for actual therapy.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's really helpful too to think about, because I think there is a fine line. And when I think about, there are some people that I've heard tell stories that afterward I was like, oh, like I wonder if the person in that story, if they knew that story was shared, But then again, it's that like you said, the fine line of this is my personal experience. I'm processing these things, and I want others to help me because again, we've all experienced similar things, so it's necessary and helpful. But then, I appreciate that struggle of, okay, should I share this? It's bursting out, but so I really appreciate that perspective, and I'm sure every storyteller that gets on stage has those moments of like, okay, like how far is too far, and so that's,
I want to share my story.
Yeah, exactly,
right? And
not someone else's. Exactly. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, so to wrap up, I mean, I know there are probably a lot of people who have come to Story Slams or Carapace or other Moth events or even our event at Eddie's Attic and have been in the crowd and like hear a story and think, man, like I have something that I would love to share or would love to get on a stage and tell my story. But then they're like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. So, for those people who are maybe new to this or who've been around a while, but as an audience member who are struggling with, man, should I do this? What advice would you give to someone who's kind of on the fence and saying, all right, should I jump into this or not?
Yeah. You know what I would say? I would say we got you. Right? We're there for you. Yeah. It's like a trust fall, right? There's great people, whether it's at any of these types of events, that we got you.
Yeah.
Right? And you've seen at the Moth where people struggle,
Yeah.
right? People struggle, and everybody cheers,
Yeah.
right? And goes over afterwards, and it's great, right? And you know, there's you don't have to be a story. Everyone's a storyteller,
Yeah.
right? It's not a professional accomplishment. You can get up and tell a story that doesn't have the perfect arc, and it doesn't have the colorful language around the descriptions.
Yeah.
You've got really good people behind you that you just go and we got you.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure. Well, and I know I've probably shared this in previous interviews. I can't remember for sure, but years ago, probably, I don't know, it's been a couple years ago, before I ever came to a Moth event, before I did any of this, I went to a Creative Mornings event down in the city, and I just wanted to go check it out because I had a day off, and I'd heard good things about Creative Mornings, and Amina Brown was the host of the show, and that particular day, John Good was the guest speaker. And at that time, I had heard of John, but I'd never met him and hadn't heard him speak. And they were talking about patterns and just your life and kind of career and all these different things. And he shared this quote and just kind of elaborated a little bit. But basically, he said that when he talks to people, he encourages them to jump off the cliff and find their wings on the way down. Basically, is kind of how he worded it. And was just encouraging people in the crowd that if you're in a transition, if you're, whatever it is that you're kind of getting yourself into, like there comes a time when you kind of just have to trust. And so when you said that, it reminded me of John's advice to say, like, sometimes you got to just do it. And part of that process is you maybe look silly or you're going to learn things as you go. But when you have trusted people around you who have your best interest in mind, it makes it a little bit easier. And I have definitely found that in this community that people love to support and they want people to get involved. They want,
absolutely. And
to be
add on
encouraging.
to humbly add on to what John said, storytelling at these local events is not even, it's not a cliff. It's a step.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yes.
it's, right. Go take the step.
Yes.
Right. And we'll support you.
Yeah.
The cliff is a little bit harder to support.
Yes, totally. Yes.
Margin of error is
100%. Yes. So, well,
but that's great advice.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Samuel, I so appreciate you taking the time to do this and being able to just have this conversation. But more than that, just your connection to me and to this community, and just getting to know you as a friend has been a joy. And so thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that our families have connected and that we've connected, and you've brought people together, and looking forward to see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for me, that's what it's all about. I think as we continue to press on and connect people, and like, I know it kind of sounds a little cliche or a little silly, but like that really is the goal, is like, let's get people in a room where they can feel safe and share their story and learn something about each other, so that people love each other more and realize, again, we have more in common than we do uncommon. So that's awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
Great.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
All right.